Thanks for checking out this video. So this is it. This is the big one. This is what I work hard for all year long, so I can put this together, a list of my top horror films of the year. And, you know, disclaimer, this is just my opinion on what I think are the best horror films of this year. I'm doing the top 25 for 2024 because I think this was a great year for horror. There were so many unexpected hits. There were so many unexpected hidden gems, and you'll hear about some of those in my list. But since this is a much longer list of 25, I'm actually going to just give you a little synopsis of each one, a few sentences, and then just give you a few sentences about why they're on my list. And I don't want to give a whole lot away because I'm sure there are going to be titles on this list that you want to check out and you don't want anything spoiled. So I won't be spoiling things, but I will be telling you why they're on my list for the most part. Might have to pause for a drink here and there, just so you know, just because I do these in one take and it just takes a while. But the other thing is, please, if you like this video or any video I've ever done, thumbs up on the video would be great. Subscribing would be a great way to show your appreciation. And if you also are interested in pitching in a little bit monetarily, I do have memberships, and you do get some perks with those memberships, including seeing all my videos ahead of when they come out, and I schedule out like months sometimes. So there are reviews of movies that'll be on this list that aren't available on my channel yet. So you could check those out right now, but that's linked in the description. Go ahead and check it out if you're interested. Anyway, let's get into it. My top 25 for 2024. Coming in at number 25 is a film called New Life. Now, I haven't really heard many people talk about this one, but this one is very underrated in my opinion. It's basically about a woman who's on the run, and you're not 100% sure why. And part of the appeal of this film is why. You know, why is this woman on the run? And there's someone who's following her who's being directed by an organization that you have to retrieve this woman. So it's, why is this woman on the run, and why is this woman after her, and what are their individual stories, and how do those stories come together? It's very interesting. It uses a recent world event in a very interesting way, and the story is very compelling, especially where it ends in the very end of the film. So that's what I'm going to say about New Life. Definitely check it out. 100% worth it. That's my number 25. Number 24 is a film from France. It is called The Vortac. Now, this one's actually going to end up being on Shudder on the 27th of January, so you can check it out there. If you have Shudder, it'll be basically free because you're already paying for it. But this is a very interesting film that's basically shot like it was from the 70s. It's a vampire film about a vampire called a Vortac, which basically feeds on relatives when it becomes a vampire. And it's about a noble dandy man back in the, I think, like 1700s, 1800s, who is lost in the woods. He was just robbed, and he comes up across this kind of aging castle where this very closed-off family is living, and he is seeking help from them, but there's a Vortac involved, so it's a whole, like, kind of typical vampire film, but kind of not. The characters are very interesting. That's one of the reasons I have it on here. It's very kind of quirky. There's a comedic aspect to it, and I think they made a really interesting, bold choice with making the actual vampire itself a puppet, which gives it this kind of surreal feel. But I highly recommend this one, and The Vortac is my number 24. Number 23, the film You Are Not Me. Now, this film is from Spain. I just saw it recently. The premise is a couple who just had a baby who are living in Brazil go to Spain to visit the one individual's family, and things feel a little weird. They have a new person living there that they're starting to treat kind of like their own daughter and not their actual own daughter, and they're kind of like up and down emotionally with her. So she's trying to figure out, what is going on here? Why is my family acting so weird? And it's a horror film. I don't want to give you too much past that, but the ending is what is worth everything for this film. It is a little bit slow on the pacing, but the characters are interesting, their interactions are interesting, and the ending is where it super, super shines. So do not pass this one up. Seek it out. You Are Not Me is my number 23. Now coming in number 22, Late Night with the Devil. A lot of people love Late Night with the Devil. I didn't love it as much as everyone else did, although I did quite like it because it's on my list. Basically about a talk show host, and this is another one that makes it feel like it's actually from the 70s, about a talk show host who recently lost his wife, so that ends up playing a part in the film. And he has some really wild things happen on one of his shows where he has people come on who, one guy who's basically a psychic, and then a girl who's supposedly possessed. And the question is this stuff real? Is this stuff not real? And they do some really interesting things with the story. The main reason I have this one making my list, though, is because of the performance of David Dastmalchian, who typically does not get leading roles, but he is phenomenal as the character Jack Delroy in this. And that he is the main reason I'm putting this on my list, because he makes it such an enjoyable experience. It's an interesting story, and they do a great job of setting it in the 70s and making it feel the way it's supposed to feel. But it's all about Dastmalchian for me with this one. So that's why Late Night with the Devil is my number 22. Number 21, another one I'm not hearing much about. This is a film from Australia, You'll Never Find Me. Now, this one is basically like a fever dream in certain ways. It's basically about a man who's in a trailer. He lives in a trailer, and he gets visited by a woman, and it's very tense between them. So you're not quite sure what is happening, but I'm not going to go further than that because you need to see how things end up playing out. And that's the whole thing that drives the film forward, is trying to figure out what's happening between these individuals. Extremely good acting, very well shot, great lighting, great use of different lights. And it's confusing, but by the end you kind of understand what's happening, and it's very intense at times. I just love the way this is shot. The atmosphere is unbelievable. The acting is unbelievable. All those things coming together, even though this is very low budget, makes me say you have to watch this. You'll Never Find Me is my number 21. Now coming in at number 20, another film I've heard pretty much no one talk about, the film Blackout. Now this was done by Larry Fessenden, and he does some really interesting, especially character-wise films, and this is no different than his other films as far as characters being really engaging. It's about a guy in a small town who's having alcohol binging issues. But he's also, he's kind of like in and out of what's going on with his life, but there's a question of, is he also a werewolf? And so it's basically about him going on this journey of trying to figure out what he should be saying to people, what he shouldn't be saying to people. Is he a werewolf? Is he not a werewolf? But it's so much deeper than the alcoholism. It's so much deeper than the werewolf situation. It is very emotional. It has amazing characters, and this is a film that I highly, highly recommend to people. So definitely check out Blackout. That's my number 20. Now at number 19 is a film that people will say, is that really horror? It has horror elements, and I really need people to watch this film. That is why it's on my list. At number 19, it's the film Things Will Be Different. Can't give you too much about this one, but it's basically about a brother and sister who are having hard times in their lives kind of separately. You get the idea that stuff has happened between them, and they want to patch it up. They knock off a bank, and it's about them trying to get away with the money. They go to a house that is a special house in certain ways. And you'll understand what I mean when you start watching it, because it doesn't take too long to actually get to that. But I don't want to spoil that aspect of it. But once the things start happening with the house is when it gets very interesting and very intricate. This is a very low budget film, but it's very well acted. The story is very good. The script is tight. And for being as low budget as it looks phenomenal. And the story twists and turns and is complex, and it is outstanding. I highly, highly recommend this one. 19, Things Will Be Different. Definitely check that out. Then coming in at number 18, the remake Speak No Evil. This was originally a Danish and it was a Netherlands and Denmark collaboration film from 2022, I think, so 2 years ago. And the remake actually is, well, I'll give you the idea of the premise. It's about a couple who goes on vacation. They meet another couple who's basically becomes good friends to them while they're on the vacation and says, well, why don't you come and hang out with us? And they're like, yeah, actually, we'll come vacation to your place. But these people aren't kind of what they seem. And there's kids involved, and it's it gets intense and it gets messed up, and I don't want to say too much, but this is a remake of another film, a foreign film, that I think that original film, the ending is a lot better, but I think overall this remake is a better film. It is filmed better, in my opinion. James McAvoy is in it, and he just steals like every scene he's in. He does an amazing job. And it's been a long time since I've actually seen people do this good of a job with a remake. So it's really quite well done, and I do recommend it at number 18, the remake of Speak No Evil. Real quick, pause for horror hydration. Now going on to number 17, the South Korean film Exuma. This one really caught me by surprise. It is a little bit on the long side, but this is about a bunch of supernatural investigators, and this film does have a very investigative mystery feel to it, who are summoned to basically move a grave of a individual who has kind of supernatural things tied to them, and then it's about all the aftermath after that grave ends up being moved and they realized maybe we shouldn't have messed with this. It is extremely well shot. Has a very interesting premise to it. The ending, although it's kind of drawn out too much, is very, very good. It has really interesting acting, and like I said, the investigative aspect of it is super interesting and cool. So definitely check out Exuma. That's my number 17. Now coming in at number 16, I think it was an A24 film, Love Lies Bleeding. Yes, it was an A24 film, just hit me. Yeah, Love Lies Bleeding, which is basically, it's set in the 80s, and it's about a woman who works at a gym that her family owns, but her family is also kind of criminally involved in a lot of stuff, and she has someone who kind of stops through on her way to Vegas because she has dreams of being a bodybuilder. And there's an infatuation that starts, and a relationship ends up blossoming between these two. But it's about how that then becomes destructive, and how, the involvement with this one individual's family becomes a problem. And yeah, and it goes some horror places. And it's weird, but it's also interesting and cool and extremely well shot and extremely well acted. And I really enjoyed it. So make sure you check out Love Lies Bleeding. That's my number 16. Now at number 15, the Scottish film Odity. Now not Scottish, Irish. My apologies. The film from Ireland, Odity. Now people have talked a good amount about this one, and I understand why. It's a low-budget independent film, but it's really well done. It's about a woman whose twin sister was brutally murdered recently. So she is kind of looking to find out what really happened and use some things that she sells. She basically runs a supernatural, like a haunted item museum / shop. And so she is using these to help her in figuring out who did this and maybe getting a little bit of payback. And that's as much as I'm going to say. There's stuff in this that is legitimately scary, legitimately creepy. Atmosphere is built extremely well. It's really well acted, and it's a very interesting story. So I highly recommend checking out Odity. That's my number 15. Then coming in at number 14, from a larger franchise, the film The First Omen. This one was a huge surprise for me. I haven't been a big fan of the Omen films in general, so story-wise, it just fits into the whole Omen thing with there potentially being an antichrist. The whole Damien is the demon child type thing from the first one and carries through the franchise. But it's about one nun who is going to another country in which she is supposed to be, trying to fit in there and forge a pious life. And some terrible things happen, and she uncovers some terrible things, and it's extremely well shot. It goes way harder on the gore and the horror aspects than I thought it would, and it's extremely well executed. It has a very good story to it, and there's some great messed up visuals in this film. It really caught me by surprise. Very well done. That's why The First Omen is my number 14 film of the year. Now coming in at number 13, a film from France, Infested. This is a creature feature. You don't get a whole lot of creature features these days, especially ones that are good. So this is about a guy who kind of collects spiders, and he ends up coming across a spider that someone sells him. They're not quite sure about where the spider came from. Here's your hint that it's not a good idea to be taking it in. he lives in a kind of rundown apartment complex where the spider ends up getting loose, and then it's not just one spider, maybe it's more spiders, and it goes on from there. But the way it's executed is so good. The CGI on the spiders is phenomenal. There's also a deeper story here about socioeconomics and people's race, and it's very fun at a surface level, but it's a lot deeper than that and interesting and important of a commentary on things in France. Really well done. Love the spiders in this. Legitimately scary at times. So that's why I'd say check out Infested. That's my number 13. Now at number 12, a documentary, Doc of Chucky. And yes, this is a documentary about all the films and the TV show for the Child's Play franchise, or the Chucky franchise, as people just call it. This is over 5 hours. It is so comprehensive. You hear from all the most important people about their experiences with the films, about their love for the films. Obviously, Don Mancini's in there talking about all sorts of interesting stuff as it comes to what he could and couldn't do with the franchise and what he achieved. It's a phenomenal franchise as far as horror goes. And to get this much work put into a documentary about all these films and the TV show, it's just awesome. So you really have to see it, especially if you're a fan. Even if you're not a fan, honestly, you really have to see it. Really well done. So number 12, Doc of Chucky. Now coming in at number 11, A Quiet Place Day One. Another film in a franchise that I didn't think I'd have on my list, especially this high up. But then I saw it, and I was like, this is actually really good. What they managed to do with the story really has impact. It gets very emotional, so just know that. But it's about a woman who has terminal illness. I believe she's terminally ill with cancer. And A Quiet Place happens. It's called Day One because this is the prequel to the first Quiet Place film that came out. And it's basically what happens as soon as these creatures fall from outer space and start mauling people. And it focuses on this main character who ends up meeting someone else, and then ends up, she also has a cat, so there's a cat character in it, which, I love cats, so that's great for me. But A Quiet Place Day One was way better of a story than I thought it would be for what it is as a prequel. It gets very emotional. It has a very powerful ending to it, and it was just so much more than I expected from it. It's so well done. Great acting as well. So that's why you need to check out A Quiet Place Day One. That's my number 11. Now coming in at number 10, we're hitting the top 10. Red Rooms, a French-Canadian film, I believe filmed in Quebec. Red Rooms. This one is horror, but it doesn't go super horror. This is more of like the horror is in your head. The horror is off screen. The horror is what you're thinking about based off what's being talked about in this film. And it's about a woman who's so deep into the true crime world, specifically one case of a guy involved with what are called red rooms. If you know, you know. And she is going to the trial of this individual. Now, when in the trial, you're not seeing any of these horrible things that he's being accused of. You are hearing about it. And that is chilling enough the way they do it. And it's focused on this one character who's going in there, and you're seeing how her life is kind of spinning out of control because of how invested she's getting in this. And then also there's another kind of true crime fan who's showing up as well, who she befriends, and it's about their relationship as well. So it's a very interesting character piece, but it also says something very clearly by the end of this film about society and about us as people. And I think it's really well done, really well shot, very interesting story, something very different. So that's why my number 10 is Red Rooms. Now coming in at my number 9 is another French-Canadian film. That's weird. Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. I adore this film. If I'm talking about what I think are my favorite films of the year, this would be much higher up, potentially number one or number 2, because I adore this film. It's a comedy, it's a horror comedy, but it's about a girl who is born with an issue with her fangs. It's a vampire family, and she's born with an issue where when she sees people who she's supposed to be feeding from in fear, she actually has her fangs retract. She cannot feed in that way, and she's kind of been coddled in her life by her family because of this. But it gets to a point where they say, you know what, you need to go out on your own, you need to figure out how to kill somebody and eat. and sustain on your own. And she ends up meeting a boy who is not feeling great about himself, and as the title would say, having these thoughts. And it's about the relationship that is forged between them and where things go from there. And like I said, it does have comedy elements. It's very cute at times, it's very emotional at other times, and it's a great time. And there is some good gore to it as well. So I love this film. I adore this film. Number 9, Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. Now coming in at number 8, the film from Guatemala, Rita. This was by the same guy who did La Llorona from a few years ago that was very highly lauded. This should also be highly lauded. This is also based on a true story like La Llorona was, where a girl who is kind of run afoul of the law a little bit and is considered to be a bit of a delinquent is put in an orphanage home that's actually run a lot more like a prison for girls. And they're all kind of broken up into these factions that makes it start feeling very Guillermo del Toro Pan's Labyrinth-esque in the way that it's seen through this young character's eyes, because that's how she kind of has to live, so she makes it kind of fantasy in a way. And it's about that horrible time and the horrible people involved with it. And I won't, spoil anything, but what it ends up happening in the end that you can look up after watching the movie. Don't look it up ahead of time. But I do highly recommend this one. It is emotional. I got very emotional with it. This is one of those films, it's important filmmaking because there are actual events tied to it that people should know about and learn from. But anyway, that's why my number 8 is Rita. Now, number 7, a film that was pretty divisive for people, Oz Perkins' Longlegs. I loved Longlegs. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, it was just so slow. It wasn't actually that great of a story. I actually thought it was a very interesting story, which it's about a girl who has a woman who, when she was a girl, had a very weird interaction with this very weird man. And then she ends up growing up and becoming a detective, and she's on the trail of this serial killer, and she's trying to figure out, how do I start knowing all these things? Like, she has this intuition, so it's this kind of question of like, is she kind of like clairvoyant to a degree? Like, what's really going on here? But it feels a lot like Silence of the Lambs, but I know a lot of people hate that comparison because they're like, it's not nearly as good as Silence of the Lambs. But I think the atmosphere building is phenomenal. The acting is phenomenal. Nick Cage gives a very weird and fun performance that is also unsettling at the same time. And for me personally, I thought the endings of the story was awesome and very interesting. A lot of people didn't like it, but I really did. So anyway, my number 7, Longlegs. Now coming in at number 6, a movie that really has grown on me over time after I reviewed it, The Devil's Bath. Now, this is a film from Austria, and it's very long. It takes place in the 1700s, and it's about a woman who has just gotten married to this man she was very eager to marry. Then real life starts setting in, and she just feels like her life is just doing chores, and it gets so mundane, it gets so depressing, and it's about that. It's about her becoming depressed, and then what she ultimately sees as her potential way out, which is shocking, which is horrible, which is really messed up, and maybe hard for some people to see when it happens. But this film goes places you don't expect. I love the ending of it. I love how ballsy it is. And it's so well shot. It's so well acted. It tries to encapsulate depression, and I think it does such a good job of it. And that's part of the reason that it is kind of more long and drawn out, because to feel depression. This is a very important film, and it is based on some true events, and I think it really needs to be seen by everyone. So The Devil's Bath, my number 6. Now coming in at number 5, and some people may say, didn't this come out last year? But yes, I didn't see it then. It was limited in theaters, and then it was gone for a while. But Godzilla Minus One is my number 5, from Japan, obviously. This is one of the best installments in the Godzilla franchise, in my opinion. It has a real human story to it, which Godzilla films typically don't have. It mainly just focuses on the monsters. You literally could do this film without Godzilla, and it's still a great film, in my opinion. Very emotional, very impactful, but it takes place in Japan after World War II, and then Godzilla shows up, and everyone needs to try and come together to beat this evil. And like I said, it gets very emotional, very impactful. This film is very well done. It looks phenomenal. That is why Godzilla Minus One is my number 5. Now, coming in at number 4, another divisive film, the A24 film, I Saw the TV Glow. I think this was a phenomenal film. It's about a youth in a kind of smaller town who becomes aware that he feels a little bit different. And what is he going through in life? Well, he ends up meeting this girl and a friend, and they end up really connecting over this kind of ridiculous, like Nickelodeon-esque, 90s Nickelodeon-esque TV show that's just really weird and has like these horror elements to it. And then kind of the lines blur between kind of reality and this world with this TV show. And it does have some horror elements to it, but I believe it is PG-13, so it's kind of light at the same time. But it's not about the horror of this film. What it's about in this film is the subtext here. And it's not a film that's meant specifically for a person like me, but it is one of those films where you can pull something personal out of it because of what you've gone through in your life. Because there are elements of it that are kind of universal in a way. And it's very well done, and it's very impactful. And I cannot remember the last time I deeply felt the way I felt after watching this film in quite some time. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend it. Number 4, I Saw the TV Glow. Now coming in at number 3, a much bigger budget film. This one is Alien Romulus. So I thought this was a great return to the form for the franchise, and I'm very interested to see what Fede Alvarez might have up his sleeve for another Alien film if they're going to go that direction. But Alien Romulus goes with a younger generation of people who are kind of like they go to a space station or a spaceship that's kind of not occupied anymore, that they're trying to scrap. They're trying to scavenge parts from it for a mission that they want to kind of go on together. And xenomorphs, obviously you have to get to them at some point with this, but it's so well shot. There's such great intensity in a lot of scenes. The story's actually pretty compelling and interesting. It is interesting how they decided to weave it into the events of the franchise. And yeah, like I said, I just think it's a really good return to form. And there is something very new and interesting that they do at the end of the film as well. And I'm very excited to see where things go from here. But Alien Romulus, my number 3. It looks phenomenal. And the CGI, by the way, was unbelievable. So Alien Romulus, number 3. Now, coming in at number 2 is one that a lot of people have had as their number 1 for the year. It was a hard decision for me between 1 and 2, but I'm going with number 2 for The Substance. Now, this film is a French, UK, and US joint venture. Coralie Fargit did The Substance. She had done the film Revenge before. Now, The Substance stars Demi Moore, and she does a really phenomenal job. Her performance is unreal in this film. It's a body horror film, and oh, is it ever a body horror film. David Cronenberg would watch this and be very proud, I think, of where his legacy is going. So it's basically about Demi Moore's character, who has a very popular workout TV show, but she's aging out of it because she's not beautiful enough anymore, according to kind of the executive who runs everything. So she's being pushed out. She is approached by some people who say, hey, you want to try this thing called The Substance? And it has the ability to make you young again in a way. And I'm not going to spoil how that is because it's tied into the great body horror stuff. But things start to spiral out of control. It becomes this duality between the two versions of this individual's self. And things get nasty. And things get disgusting. And things get oozy and sticky and gross. And it's also very tongue-in-cheek and kind of comedic at the same time. And what a lot of people end up not liking about this film is how kind of ridiculous it feels at times. But they set that up in the very beginning of the film. Like, this is what it's supposed to be. It's almost supposed to be a bit cartoonish. And I think that works tonally for me. And I think this is phenomenally shot. It's pretty well written. the practical effects are unreal, and it's just fun. It's a great time. So my number 2, The Substance. Now, the big one, my number 1, another A24 film, the Hugh Grant helmed film Heretic. This film is outstanding. Loved it. The script is unbelievable. It's about two Mormon missionaries. Well, not missionaries because they're not leaving the country, but two young Mormon girls who decide that they're going to go to this one particular man's house to talk to him about their religion. And he's very open to it, played by Hugh Grant. But things aren't always as they seem, and once he's finally able to get them inside the house, they cannot get out of the house unless they follow his rules. Now, it is horror. It does get very horror, and I like the horror path it treads, but it's very dialogue driven, and it's dense, intelligent dialogue. You can tell that there was a lot of research done in order to pull off this script properly. I think the individuals who did it, Beck and Woods, said that it took about like 10 years for them to finish the script because they did do so much research on religion, not just the Mormon faith, but a bunch of religions. And the arguments that are put into this film throughout the dialogue is fascinating for everyone involved. Because I've talked to people who grew up religious, myself who didn't grow up religious, and we all agree that it's very compelling. The arguments are compelling. It's interesting. And the ending is such that I believe people can interpret it in different ways. I see 3 different ways that it could have been intended. I think one of them was basically to allow people to decide, do you want it to be this ending or do you want it to be this ending? And I think there's a brilliance in that. The script is brilliant. Hugh Grant's performance is unbelievable, but the 2 girls who play the Mormons are unbelievable as well. It's just, not only does Hugh Grant do a great job, but his character is so interesting and so well written. And I think that's why he stands out the most. But anyway, Heretic, there you go. My number 1 for the year. Like I said, this was an awesome year for horror. Let me know what your top were. You don't have to do 25. Give me like your top 1, your top 5, your top 10, whatever you feel like. I'm always interested to see what other people are thinking. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Again, these were just my thoughts for the year, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing, maybe doing a membership, whatever. But regardless, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, keep it brutal.